This is Interviews with Technical People with John Robertson,
And James have you
a podcast where we interview technical people in STEM fields.
to discuss the past, present, and future from their perspectives.
Our only announcement this week is that this is our very first episode. And today we're joined by Suresh Singh, a technical writer at a company that manufactures ground support equipment for the airline industry. We went to college with Suresh, and he's one of the people who actually helped introduce James and I during our freshman year. So we figured he would be an excellent person to start with. Suresh, we're excited to have you on with us today. How are you?
Thank you. I am I'm honored to be your first guest.
Yeah, it's an honor and it's a privilege and it's an incredible help. So thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah.
So why don't we get started, Suresh? Why don't you tell us what you do?
Sure. Well, as you said, I am a technical writer for a company that manufactures ground support equipment. What that means is we build the trucks that run around on the airports that service planes. So chances are, if you've flown a plane, you probably have been or in contact with one of our planes by one way or another. Not planes, they're ground support equipment.
So those are the ones that do like the food service and the fueling as well as the
Right, lavatory and water service, baggage carts.
the baggage carts, the pushback cars, all that sort of stuff. Wow.
The stairs.
So like everything.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Are there a lot of companies that build that sort of equipment, or is yours basically the big one?
This industry is as old as the airline industry itself. There have been many companies in the past. They're whittled down to very few now. So it's us and probably a handful of other companies that do this.
Interesting.
Nice.
And how old is your company?
They started in 1997. They were originally in Miami. Then they eventually moved up to Fort Pierce, Florida.
Fort Pierce, I've been there.
So you mentioned a lot of different types of ground support equipment, and I fly. I think all of us have been on plenty of planes. So can you tell us just a little bit more as far as what are the ones that are commonly used? What are highly in demand, and sort of what goes into designing them?
Well, there are only about a handful of pieces of equipment, and they're all used thoroughly throughout the airline industry. You always need trucks to service the laboratory and water facilities. You always need a belt loader to load and unload baggage. You always need a cart to move that baggage around. You need a tow vehicle to pull the baggage carts around. And depending on where you are, what the airport has, you may or may not need a stair to board and deboard the plane.
Your company doesn't make do they make the jetways as well, or is that someone else?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, some companies do make the jetways. We do not, actually.
Okay.
So what are some unique considerations that you need to make when making this type of equipment? I mean, are there certain regulations or requirements that are really unique to your application in the airline industry?
There aren't too many regulations. We have to design our vehicles around the aircraft itself. So depending on the height of the service panels for the laboratory and water facilities, we have to adjust for that, make sure that our vehicles aren't too high and they're not too low that they can't drive around on the ramp. For stairs, you have to make sure that they can be articulated to any height to meet whatever door sill height is out there. That's basically it. Just whatever the plane is spec for, that's what we have to design for.
Does your company design for certain airlines, or do you just design in general and then it's customizable or flexible to fit the airline that buys it?
Well, that's funny you say that. We're actually a fairly small company, so we have the freedom to do whatever the customer wants. A lot of the larger companies will say, here's our product, this is what you have, take it as it is. But us being a small company, we have the freedom to kind of build it custom to what the customer wants.
So is your customer the airlines, or is it the airports, or both?
It's a combination. It's actually a lot of different things. It could be the city, the locale that might want to order some ground support equipment for their airport. It could be the airlines themselves. It could be a third-party distributor.
Interesting.
Nice.
And of all the things that you design, Suresh, do you have kind of your favorite one to work with or design, or just that kind of stands out with you as being unique or interesting?
Um, Honestly, they're all pretty interesting. Some things are kind of very basic. Like we have a water cabinet that just sits bolted to the ground and services planes. So that's not too exciting, but still it's interesting the amount of things that go into it. You would not think that there's
What's a
so
water
complicated.
cabinet?
Well, instead of having a truck run around and carry water to the plane to refill the potable water system, it's just a cabinet that sits at the gate, and it has a 250-foot hose that you drag out to the plane to refill.
Okay. That makes sense.
Do you guys have to take into account the variability of like different airports or even different climates? I mean, you talking about that, a hose that gets strung all this way. I mean, what if you put that in Maine in January?
Right. The airports are generally built to a certain code, so they're all pretty much the same from airport to airport. You can't have too many hills and whatnot. Actually, it's got to be pretty level throughout. As far as weather, yeah, that's a major concern of ours. A lot of northern climates, of course, we have to consider the possibility of freezing. So we have to put in a heating system to keep the plumbing warm, or to prevent freezing during freezing weather.
So I have a question that's kind of been on my mind. It's a little bit of an American manufacturing question, right? So you guys build all of this ground support equipment, and I've seen some of it, right? You drive them around. They're vehicles.
Right.
And I know vehicles are very complex machines, right? There's a lot of components, tires, engines, chassis. To what extent do you all do the manufacturing? Like do you procure, for example, the motors of the vehicles from elsewhere, and do you assemble them all in your facility? I mean, how does that go? It seems like a very complicated machine that you're building.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question that not a lot of people actually think about. Some of our equipment, like our lavatory and water trucks, we do buy commercially available chassis. They're just chassis cabs, just the bare frame and the cab itself. And we build the module, the service module, and put it on top of that chassis. Then we also have certain stairs, for example. We build completely custom. We build the chassis, we buy an engine from a distributor, and put it in and build a stair around it.
Are most of those vehicles? I like calling them vehicles. I work.
You like the word vehicle?
Yeah, I love simple words that are more complicated than they need to be. Are they all like gasoline or diesel powered? Like, what's the fuel that uses them?
It's a combination. Back then, when this first started, a lot of them were diesel, but a lot of the regulations have come into play where you can't have certain types of diesel. They have to be Tier 4, especially in California. So now the diesels have been slowly fading out, and gasoline-powered equipment are emerging.
It seems like one of those applications that would actually be fairly well suited for electric motors, just like how we're seeing to some extent the electrification of our car fleet, just because they're always fairly close to maybe what could be considered a charging station, right? Is there any talk of doing that, going from fossil fuels to electrical power?
Actually, yes, there have been a lot of vehicles that have been produced with batteries, electric motors. I'm not sure if there's a big push to get away from fossil fuels entirely, but there are a lot of vehicles that are powered by electric, particularly pushbacks. There's one company that makes completely their entire business is electric pushbacks.
Yeah, it's something that I find interesting. Kind of, it seems like some industries are leading the way in that push, but there's a lot of other auxiliary industries that I'm just curious when they'll also completely convert, if at all. So interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I know with some smaller companies, it's just cheaper and easier to keep using the internal combustion because it works and it's pretty cheap, and so is gas.
It's such a mature technology. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And all right, I have another question, Suresh. So let me ask you this: so we already talked a little bit about sort of electric motors and so forth, but in your perspective, in your mind, where is this industry going? where are you seeing it head? What does the future hold?
Well, you see it a lot in the automotive industry. Everything is headed towards automation. So that's pretty much where we're headed ourselves. We're actually toying with that right now, trying to get sensors to work with the engine and get everything to talk together, trying to make the whole process completely automated. Particularly in European countries, they're moving towards a no-touch solution for servicing these planes. They don't want the equipment to contact the plane whatsoever anymore. So they're coming within a few centimeters, and they stop just short of touching the plane to avoid accidents. So that's pretty much where we're headed: complete automation.
But how do you fuel a plane and change out sewer and water without touching?
Well, it's just basically for the approach. We don't want these trucks to run into the planes, and there are many incidents currently that where trucks just run into planes because they're not paying attention, or maybe they thought the pedal was the brake pedal, but it turned out to be the accelerator.
When that happens, whose fault is that? Is that like the operator's fault, or do they try to like blame the manufacturer for?
They'll do an investigation. The company that services the plane will probably take the blame, but ultimately, yes, it is the operator's fault.
Yeah, and planes are expensive.
Yeah, they are. They actually, these companies, the ones that service the planes, they take out $1 million insurance policies for that reason.
Interesting. For ground support equipment.
The operators, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a bad reason to have your flight be delayed. And I wonder how many times has a flight delay that I've been a part of been caused by something like that, right? some sort of issue on the and that kind of reminds me of a different topic, right? So often, you know, a very familiar situation is us sitting in the terminal of an airport and seeing everyone scurrying around down on the plane, driving around this equipment, some of which probably you've worked on.
Right.
And just understanding how everything needs to work so perfectly well to keep on that schedule, right? Because that's like the worst thing ever for an airline to have a lot of late flights. People track that.
Sure, yeah.
So do you all, is that a major part of your design intent to try to make it efficient, have minimal downtime? To what extent does that play into your design work?
This equipment is as basic as possible. We try not to make it too complicated. It depends on the application, of course, but like particularly lav and water trucks, it's just basic plumbing, like your household plumbing. It's just a pump that runs off of a hydraulic system. The hydraulic system runs off of the truck engine, so it's not too complicated. Just for the purpose of, you know, who's working on these trucks and who has to use these trucks.
Do you ever get to drive around and test drive the vehicle?
All the time, yeah.
Nice.
They have to be thoroughly tested before they go out into the field.
Have you tested them, though?
I have, yeah.
Nice.
Some, actually all airports have a speed limit, for example, and the speed limit is about 25 miles per hour or so. So we have an electronic governor that controls the engine speed. It keeps the engine speed from exceeding that limit, and we set it to whatever the customer wants, typically 20 miles per hour. So part of the process of getting these trucks ready is to test that governing system to make sure that it does indeed keep the speed down. So yeah, I have on many occasions tested these.
I love the process of trying to break things to prove that it works right.
Well, it's better to break it in the factory than have it break out in the field.
Absolutely.
I'm fascinated by this concept of there being a 25 mile an hour speed limit in a lot of airports.
Yeah.
And the first thought that came to my head was, does that include the plane?
No. Just the servicing equipment.
Just the service, because also, when the plane has to turn around when it's being docked at its gate and then turn around to face the runway, there's a little vehicle that latches onto its front wheel and pushes it. Do you guys make that as well?
Yeah, the pushback.
The pushback.
Right. We do not. But on that note, there are a couple different ways to do that pushback operation. There's a vehicle that actually picks up the landing gear of the plane and drags it out wherever it has to go. And the other is the traditional method, is where they use a tow bar. So they connect to the landing gear, and the landing gear connects, to the pushback vehicle through that tow bar.
Maybe I missed it. Well, so I think I've seen that one where there's a linkage, right between the front landing gear and the vehicle. What was the first one?
It's the vehicle itself just picks up the landing gear.
Yeah, it's almost like they wedge under the front wheels, so
Right.
under it, so the front wheels aren't touching the ground, but the truck
Like a tow
is.
truck.
Yeah,
Right.
Like a big tow truck.
I've seen
Pretty
a few
much,
of
that's
those.
Huh. I don't think I've seen that. Interesting.
It might have been in Europe. I don't remember where, but I know I've seen it once or twice.
Yeah.
Is that the hot new thing?
It's not the newest thing. Like I said, they have a mixture. They do one or the other. It depends on the customer and what they're willing to pay.
They want the fancy one.
I bet the linkage pushback is a lot cheaper.
Yeah, a little bit cheaper.
Let's take a moment now, because one thing we want to hit in every episode is a little bit of how you got to where you currently are. Sort of how does one become a technical writer for a company of this sort? What was your path? Where did you go to college? And it's funny because James and I know this answer because I think we were with you every step of the way. For college.
I'd say so too. Yes.
But in your words, why don't you just tell us what your path looked like?
Yeah. So, just in high school, I've always dreamed, or even before high school, I dreamed of being in the space industry, just anything to do with space. So the best thing is to go into aerospace engineering. And my family has been looking to move to Florida for a while. And right where we are is pretty close to where I went to school. So that's kind of what led me to the Florida Institute of Technology.
That's a good school. I've heard
That's
good
a
things
great
about
school.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You approve. You've heard of it?
I've heard of it.
You've heard of it? Sure. I went to Florida Tech to pursue a degree in aerospace engineering. I figure that's the best thing to get me into the space industry. So I did my degree, graduated a little bit later than most. Then I sat at home for a while, like a lot of people are doing now. It's tough to get a job nowadays. The market's just completely flooded with people with degrees, just a different world. But I sat around. I eventually discovered the Florida State has an employment agency, sort of. I guess every state has this. So I took some interest into it, and eventually they introduced me to the company that I work for now. I guess they have a partnership with them. They get some people in, and it's all about numbers. They move people in and get numbers for budgets and whatnot. But I was a product of that, which I'm not upset about completely, but it worked out. Can't complain about things working out one way or another. So I ended up doing technical writing for this company. At first, I didn't use anything that I learned in school from aerospace engineering, but eventually they kind of saw that I had potential, so they introduced me to more engineering work, and now I'm doing a little bit more than I was before. I'm doing less technical writing and more engineering, but so that's how I ended up there.
I say aerospace engineering is a branch of mechanical, which kind of makes sense in this, I would think.
Right, yeah. A lot of the work they do is mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
So on that note, Suresh, I just want to ask you a question. So thanks for that background. And so as a technical writer who's more and more growing into an engineering role, what does a day in your life at that company look like? What are some of the daily things that you work on to make these vehicles?
Well, as a technical writer, I'm in charge of updating and even writing brand new instruction manuals for operating these units, operating, maintaining, servicing. In addition to that, I do instructions. I do instructions and installation instructions, particularly for in-field or even in the shop. I also take pictures of things just to document new changes or things like that. As far as the engineering goes, if there's something small that I can make that's not super important, like a little bracket, they'll let me design a bracket. I'll do the drawing for it. A little bit more now than before. They've been letting me actually write the program for, say, punching these brackets. The punching is just one of the processes that they go through to build a bracket. Essentially, they cut a piece of metal down to size. They put it through this machine. Kind of looks like a big stapler. And what it does, it has several different hole punches, different sizes. It punches per the program, comes off of that machine, and they take it to the brake press and they bend it up to whatever angle it has to be, and they'll move it on to the next process. If it gets welded, it goes on to welding, or if it goes straight on to the final assembly process where they actually put it onto the vehicle.
This is all done in-house?
All in-house.
You guys must have a lot of custom brackets.
Oh yeah, one of the running jokes is that the engineer is he makes brackets all day.
Why is that?
Well, I touched on this earlier. Being a small company, we'll basically build a truck to the customer's specification. Whatever they want, we'll do it. So we oftentimes have to do things a little bit differently than usual. So that's why we need different brackets.
I remember when I was on my high school robotics team, and it felt like for a couple weeks I was a custom sprocket maker. We were making more and more sprockets, and I just sat there doing it. It wasn't terribly interesting, but it was useful, and It had to be done. So you got to make brackets. You make brackets.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You got to start somewhere.
So when you're making these custom designs, what changes besides the brackets, or is that like the meat and potatoes, right? Something changed, just need a new bracket to make a custom order.
Yeah, it's not necessarily brackets that have to be changed. Sometimes, the biggest thing, particularly on laboratory and water service trucks, we have a fluid pumping system. So we pump water or some kind of solution from a holding tank on the truck into the plane. Originally, we had the plumbing on the opposite side of the heating system. And for whatever reason, I guess because that's the only way it could fit, then fairly recently, about a year or so ago, we had to figure out how to move everything to the other side so that everything is under the heat. That's where the bracket thing came in. But in addition to the brackets, you have to figure out how to build support structure for that, make sure that everything is supported. You have things to bolt to. So pretty much, if it needs to be changed, we'll kind of investigate a little bit. Sometimes it comes down from the customer. They say, we would like to see this change in the truck, so then we'll take that and run with it.
Interesting.
I was wondering, are you the technical writer for the company, or are you part of a technical writing team? Or,
Again, being a small company, I am the only technical writer. And touching on the engineering, we have only one engineer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's a small operation.
It is. It's less than 50 people. Last I checked, it was 37.
I interned for a company a while back that I get to know the technical writer they had there, and they sold a handheld device. And I found it interesting that as the technical writer, she had to know that device as well as anybody. And so she just spent a lot of time playing with it and using it and get to know it so that she could write well about it. And I thought that was kind of
that's exactly my experience. Being a small company, you have a lot of freedom. They don't really question what you're doing at every minute. So I'm free to roam around to look at these things. And like we said before, I get to drive the equipment. I get to play with the equipment, see how it operates. And you kind of have to do that to effectively be a good technical writer. You have to know the product inside and out.
I just love this image, Suresh, of you like wandering around the manufacturing floor, like talking to all these guys, like asking, like, "Hey, like what's new with this part? What's relevant for what you're trying to do? Which is communicate how you use it." That actually sounds kind of fun.
Some days are better than others, but yeah.
So like often when I'll look at product documentation, there's like the user guide, and then there's the kind of maintenance guide. Do you have to do both of those, because they're kind of at different levels, right? One's just how to operate the equipment, the other is a much more in-depth manual.
Also, one's pretty and one's full of meat and potatoes.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, these things they don't really change too much. So most of the work I do is just updating. But yeah, it's just building on what was previously there or changing it a little bit.
Who wrote all the initial stuff?
What was that?
who wrote all of the stuff that's already in place? Did you initially write it?
Several people, and you can tell.
You can tell. Yeah, that's never good.
Do you try to make everything perfect, or you just get it good enough?
I have always been a perfectionist, so yeah, I have tried to make them all consistent. It's not an easy task. There are a lot of different manuals for different equipment, so trying to get it all to look the same is not an easy thing at all.
Do you have to do any graphic arts as well, getting, images in and created and all that sort of stuff?
Not too much. I do a little bit of light photoshopping. I'm self-taught, but barely know it. I know enough to get in trouble, as they say. I do work with drawings. I can have the ability to pull drawings or to crop whatever I need, and I can put that into the manuals.
What program do you use for writing? Is it all Microsoft Word, or is it some sort of more complicated program?
We are very basic, so we do Microsoft Publisher.
Okay.
I find out in the industry they actually use XML. Everything is XML based, so it's kind of like a web interface.
Okay, yeah.
And when you first started that job of being a technical writer, did you feel like the training that you got, and you already touched on this, that you got basically in college was adequate for what you were trying to do, or was there a lot of on-the-job learning, so to speak?
A little bit of both. Writing all those lab reports in school helped a lot. That's basically what I do now. It's just one big lab report.
I guess it is.
But yeah, a lot of it I had to learn on the job. This is a very particular industry. It's not like you can go to school for ground support equipment. So everything you have to learn on the job.
Are there like conferences of people who build ground support equipment that you go to?
There are conferences. I do not go to that.
Or technical writer conferences?
Technical writer conferences? No, I don't participate in those.
Okay. I missed. How long have you been with this company?
3.5 years.
Okay. You can get to know it by then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch on some of the other vehicles again, because I find those are really interesting. If you could take a guess, like what's the most complicated vehicle that you guys make?
The most complicated.
And I know it's very subjective.
Yeah, it depends. Our laboratory trucks can get complicated, especially for one particular customer. Air Canada, they want a lot of options on there. They want for example, a float switch that stops the pump when the fluid tank gets low. One big issue is that people tend to run these pumps, the operators, they don't know that they shouldn't do this, but they run the pumps and it causes cavitation issues and it destroys a several $100 pump. So Air Canada, one of their options that they always get is a float switch. It's a simple, basic switch that shuts off the pump, just interrupts power to the pump.
That's what's in my toilet.
Right, pretty much.
Yeah.
A little bit more complicated than that.
Well, that's fair, yeah. Same idea.
Same idea. Yeah.
So you called it a lavatory truck, right?
Right.
So that's the one that transports the material from the septic tank to wherever they store it in the airport, right?
Right. The industry term is the product. They call it.
The product.
The product.
I mean, I find that one fascinating, and I know this is true for all of them, but that vehicle has to work. The product has to work.
Oh yeah, yeah. It has 2 separate tanks, sometimes 3, depends on what the customer wants. One tank empties the lavatory. That's, of course, has to be the biggest tank. The other tank can be split in 2. Some people like to have a freshwater solution tank, which is just basic water, tap water. They flush the aircraft lavatory, and that dumps into the waste tank again. And the other tank would be the blue solution tank, which is what you see in all the porta potties, the blue water. So that they refill the solution in the aircraft.
Interesting. So half of the vehicle has a tank for emptying out the lavatory, and then there's another half of the tank that fills it up with the blue solution. Right? Interesting. So you only need one vehicle for both, empty out and fill up.
I was wondering if they would do separate or same vehicle for that.
Oh yeah, same vehicle.
Okay, just with a good barrier between the two.
Yeah, they're completely separate tanks.
And separate hoses.
Right, different hose.
Oh yeah, the hoses are clearly distinguishable. One is a big blue 4-inch hose, and the other is a 3/4 inch hose, or actually 1 inch.
Why do some customers want to flush out the tank and others not?
It depends on what they prefer. Some people don't see the need to have to rinse it with clean water. They just prefer to rinse it with the blue solution. Maybe it has something to do with cost.
Huh. I'm just curious if there's some, I don't know, some reason as far as it like reduces smells in the aircraft, although it's never really smelled anytime I've used it, or helps the tank not corrode. It's curious to me.
It's probably mostly due to cost. They probably don't want to use their blue solution purely just to rinse.
Oh,
I see. I think I missed that part. So
the blue solution is more expensive.
Water, they still do a rinse with the blue solution.
Right, yeah.
Up. I see. Okay. And then there's a separate tank on the aircraft that has blue solution, right? And that it flies with that and uses it to flush?
Yes.
Interesting.
And then that empties into a holding tank.
All right. I don't know how much you know about this, Suresh, but can you, if this isn't your area of expertise, let me know. But how on earth do those toilets in the airplanes work? When you press that flush button, I don't know where that material goes.
Yeah, that's common. It's all a vacuum system. Everything is self-contained. They used to, a long time ago, just dump it out wherever they were. But now, because of a lot of regulation, it has to be held in the tank.
They would dump it from flight?
A long time ago, yes.
I'd heard of that. Yeah, just there's a hole in the floor, and it scatters on the earth.
How long ago was a long time ago?
When the airlines first took off, 50s, 60s, or whatever. Not 50s, but 60s, 70s.
I hope they didn't dump it over like the city, the suburbs.
Well, that's where you are. When you hit the flush button, it let go.
You gotta go. I guess so.
Yeah. But now they've gotten a little bit wiser. Now they require everybody to hold particularly the waste. Things like gray water, they'll just empty out through a port. That's fine. Gray water being from the sink.
They'll just still dump gray water?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, also thinking about it, so aircraft, they fly at what, 30,000 feet?
Yeah,
I'm wondering, does that water even make it to the ground at that altitude? Does it vaporize?
It's probably vaporized. I think
right.
The ports are heated, keeps them from freezing up there. So.
Yeah, I bet in the old days when you're with your product, it being solid probably made it down, but
yeah,
probably not your hand washing solution.
Have no problem. Yeah,
I don't know. It might evaporate. Okay, so it's just a total vacuum system, and you open the little flap, and there's
right. It just sucks it into the holding tank,
and so the whole holding tank is kept at negative pressure,
right,
during flight, and then you just open this open. Wow, that's a very simple system. Huh. Interesting.
I mean, you gotta save weight. You don't want to make it complicated.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, from an airline perspective, I'll bet it's very advantageous to not have that holding tank, right? I mean, how much fuel could you save by not having to tow around? I don't know how much.
Believe it or not, these tanks are not that big. They're only about 30 gallons or so. It depends on the plane, of course, the size of the plane. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's nothing.
I know.
If I'm going from Maine to New York, I don't know. Hopefully, I can hold it that long. I don't need a big tank.
Interesting.
I was curious what the blue solution is made of.
I'm not really sure. It's some type of sanitary solution. It does contain some element that does keep odor down. Some people call it a de-germ solution, so it probably has some antibacterial properties.
Okay. Do you have to worry about it corroding tanks and whatnot, or in the stuff that you build, or is it just as fine as water?
Everything we use is pure stainless steel. It has to be stainless steel for corrosion resistance.
That makes sense.
So, I have another question. So, it's kind of obvious that this has a really big impact on people, and that's one of the things that we want to kind of touch on with this show, right?
But it's a hidden impact as well, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, not a lot of people think about what happens to the toilet water after they flush, or what happens to their baggage. They're just wondering, where is it?
Yeah, I
And
see these
everyone
machines
defined that.
every year, and I never thought about them.
I always saw them driving around.
Yeah, nobody gives them a second thought, but we are the ones that build them.
So let me just ask you another question, though. So we know that the airlines are kind of in a weird spot right now with like air traffic going down and because of the virus and all that stuff. Is there anything? Are there any big shifts happening in your industry because of all that, or is it just more of the same but at a lower rate?
Yeah, there are huge shifts. Of us personally, we had a huge layoff a couple of weeks ago. Actually, a month ago now. Um, some people are probably going to get out of this business altogether. It depends on the size of the company. Some people can weather it, some people can't.
Wow. So the ripple effects are enormous. Then is what I'm hearing of.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know we hear orders, and this is kind of more on my side of the industry. We hear talk about airlines canceling orders for planes, but I'm sure it's also true they're also canceling orders for your type of
Equipment,
vehicles.
right?
Interesting.
So it's already that quick that they're not buying, you're not building, sort
Almost
of thing.
instantly, yeah.
Really?
The
Wow.
phone stopped ringing as much as it used to.
Yeah.
Wow. Are there any plans in work to try to use this as maybe an opportunity to try to make a big improvement? Like you mentioned, probably a lot of your designs are pretty well established, right? They've been around for a while.
Right.
I mean, are there any big ideas on the table? Like, oh, like what if we combine like the lavatory truck with like the stair truck, and get one vehicle for or two vehicles for the price of one?
Well, there's plenty of time for imaginations to run wild. But in the process of trying to stay afloat, we are taking on a lot of small tasks or
Mm,
wherever we can find them. So we don't have too much time for product development. I did touch on this earlier about the automation thing. It's an ongoing project that we've been working on that's not quite anywhere near finished. So we're slowly working on that on the side.
Is your company mostly, you know, assembling? I mean, are most of the employees assemblers, or is it a lot of it product design and
It's a
just one
mixture.
engineer? Yeah.
We don't do too much design anymore. We only have the one engineer, so he does all the design if there needs to be anything engineered. Um, yeah, I never mentioned this, the whole process of how it becomes a finished product, but everything comes in as raw material, sheet metal, metal tubing, angle, uh, raw material. It goes through what we call break and shear. So everything gets cut down to size. If it has to get bent up at whatever angle, it gets bent. Um, it gets punched. As I mentioned before, it needs a certain hole pattern. After it moves through break and shear, it goes off to welding. Some things get welded, some things don't. Some things are just finished items that get bolted on. So they'll move to the last stage of the process. After welding, it all moves over to what we call final assembly, and that's where we used to have about 10 guys that would build the vehicles. They'd assemble everything in shop.
So throughout this whole process, you're probably very much involved, right? Because you're taking notes and incorporating them into the documentation, right? Um,
Right.
Interesting. So you probably know like all those people who work down in those various components, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I get to walk around and talk to them and see how they would do something, so I'd be able to translate that into a technical writing piece.
Interesting. And as things slow down, you mentioned that that kind of people are doing other things to get busy. Is there any talk about, um, maybe this is what you mean by keeping busy, kind of expanding the product line?
Yeah. The funny thing about our industry is nothing's really original. Something is always a copy of something else. Surprisingly, there are no legal issues there. But yeah, we're always looking at what other people are doing and trying to, work that into our product. And I'm sure people are doing the same thing for our products.
Is there anything about the future of this industry or anything in general that just gets you really excited as far as where it's headed?
I go back to the automation thing. Everything
Yeah.
is going to be all sensors and computer controlled.
Yeah.
It's going to take some engineering to get that up and running.
Yeah. Do
A
you think
lot.
that's something that you'll be able to lead?
I'm actually self-proclaimed a leader, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
They,
congratulations.
yeah, they tasked me with that since I'm a young kid, so I'm supposed to know everything about computers.
Yeah, I remember when that happened at work.
I mean, we're just going to show up one day and it's going to be like an AI network controlling autonomous
Yeah,
laboratory trucks just driving around on their own. I'd be like, man, who did this?
yeah.
Was it you?
Suresh
It
did.
was me. I did it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not easy. I've never done this, so it's a learning experience. Huge learning curve.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think we're kind of nearing the end of all the questions that we had. So, I think we just want to take this time to Suresh, give you any more time you want to take to give comments on this field or what you think might be excited about working in it. And
Well, I'll touch on careers in general.
yeah, please.
You might not. Everybody has an idea what they want to do when they grow up, or what field they want to go into. But I've learned from personal experience that it doesn't always quite work out that way. You might have this idea of what your life would look like, and it turns out to be completely different. So you can't get stuck on the fact that you're not where you're supposed to be. Just remember that maybe it's part of the process. Maybe you'll get there by one way or another. That's pretty much where I am right now. So I haven't given up on getting into the space field yet.
It seems like you have a really good attitude in that way. Like, you're not like building some sort of, deep space vehicle, but you are working in the aerospace industry and learning a lot.
Right.
Probably
It
every
is
day.
it is part of the aerospace industry.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good lesson for a lot of people, which is that, just take advantage of all these opportunities that you're given. Because I'm sure, and you even mentioned it, right? You've learned a lot in the 3 or so years that you've been there.
Yeah, like I said, it's a specialty industry. It's not like you can go to school for ground support equipment.
I found that in my work as well, is kind of specifically what you do. Most of the time, there's never a degree for it. You kind of get the baseline, and then you learn your specific field.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think that makes sense from what I've seen.
Right, and you can always apply it to something else.
Right.
Do you feel like it's in the cards for you to try to go like get an advanced degree to try to get a leg up on some other part of the industry, or do you like the idea of just working to get experience?
I am of the type that doesn't really do well with academics, so I don't think a graduate degree is in the cards for me. I will probably have to get it all from experience.
Interesting. And you've already done well with that, so I guess to some extent that makes sense. I remember it's funny you mentioned that. I'm having these flashbacks, Suresh, to when you and I would spend like long Saturday nights just doing work, and it's still kind of a running joke of ours.
I know exactly where this is going.
And I don't know, just one thing that I'm also hearing from you is that just like kind of hard work works. That you were able to find a position that has also been a teaching opportunity for you.
Sure, yeah, you can't have a defeatist attitude. If it
Yeah.
doesn't work out your way, there's always some other way. You never know where life will lead you.
Yeah, and I think also just like wherever you get paid to work, like that's where you give your effort and your attention,
Right,
and to
and
give
this
your
is
100% effort.
this is my first professional experience, so of course I'm going to give the best effort I can.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, any parting advice, Suresh?
That was all. Just keep looking.
Should we go through the canned questions that we have?
That's a great question. We've already hit a lot of them. The one that we didn't hit that we need to hit. It's actually number one on the list, Suresh. And I'll tell you what, we gave this to you ahead of time, so you have all the time to get your answer.
Okay.
Suresh,
Yes.
what is your favorite pizza topping?
Wow, that is a profound question.
There's only one right answer, by the way. This is not like an opinion question.
I know Suresh grew up in New York, but I mean, not everybody's a pizza snob.
Right.
Listen,
Yeah, I love the traditional New York pizza, just cheese, plain cheese. But this is a debate that always happens on whenever we have pizzas. What do you want on the pizza? I love vegetables, so it's got to be all the vegetables, whatever vegetable pizza they have. It's not just one topping; it's just a category of toppings.
The veggie.
The veggie pizza.
I feel like that's a very political answer. Like, who's going to strongly oppose that?
Well, the meat lovers for one.
You're going to go be like better than me and have your vegetables on your pizza. Okay. You started off with the right answer, by the way, of just plain cheese pizza.
Yeah.
But
you cannot beat a plain cheese pizza.
That is the correct answer is that's the best topping, cheese and tomato sauce with no substitutes.
I don't have a strong opinion, but I don't know if I agree.
Wow.
I'm almost wondering if we should lead off with that question in the future.
Right.
Well, you know what? We recorded it. Suresh, you can't take it back.
It's in the history books.
Well, that's about all the time we have here. Thank you so much, Suresh, for, again, volunteering to be the first person that we have on the show.
Well,
James,
thank you. Yeah. I'm honored again to be your first guest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like I don't know if we did this on purpose, but this is interviews with technical people, and Suresh is a technical writer, so I think we at least did what we were supposed to there.
It's in the name. So
it is, yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think this was really great. And Suresh, again, just thanks for your time. Maybe we'll have you on again sometime. But we wish you the best of all luck in your future and with keeping the airline industry going. Hopefully things tick up a little bit.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.